My beloved child, stop doubting for a moment and listen carefully. Before this day began, before you opened your eyes this morning, something about you was already settled in a place far beyond what human eyes can reach or human hands can touch. Your name has been spoken in rooms no human voice has ever entered, carried on a breath of divine authority into a record that exists outside of time itself. It has been inscribed with the permanence of eternity, in a book no earthly hand can alter, no storm can destroy, no enemy can steal, and no disappointment can erase. Yet lately, you have been sitting with your struggles, staring at what is broken, and quietly wondering whether God has somehow forgotten your address. You have been praying prayers that seem to dissolve before they reach the ceiling. You have watched doors close and seasons drag endlessly on, and somewhere deep in that silence, a small and poisonous question has taken root inside your chest. The question that whispers whether His promises were written for everyone except you. You have looked at your life and compared it to what you believed was supposed to happen by now, and you have felt something inside you start to pull back, pull in, go quiet. Today that question is answered. Today that silence is broken, because what heaven has already declared about your life cannot be undone by any circumstance on earth, and what has been written beside your name in eternity cannot be erased by any failure, any fear, or any voice that has ever had the audacity to tell you that you are not enough. Before the weight of this world tried to convince you otherwise, before the years accumulated their disappointments, and the enemy began constructing his arguments from the wreckage of your unmet expectations, a decision had already been made in a realm that exists entirely above every circumstance you have ever faced. Long before the doctors gave their report, long before the relationship collapsed under the weight of what it could not carry, long before the bank account ran dry and the rejection letter arrived with its cold and impersonal language, the verdict on your life had already been rendered in heaven, and it was rendered in your favor by a judge who never rules incorrectly and never reverses his verdicts based on how difficult your circumstances appear. People spend their entire lives wondering whether they matter, whether they are seen, whether someone with great authority and genuine power has taken specific notice of their particular existence. The answer, spoken from the highest throne in all of creation, is yes, unequivocally, irrevocably, completely, yes. You have been noticed. You have been named. You have been claimed. There is no committee in heaven still deliberating your worth, no divine panel still reviewing your file with uncertainty, no council still undecided about whether you belong in the record. The gavel came down before your first breath, and it struck in your favor with a sound that echoed through all of eternity. The book of heaven does not contain provisional entries written in pencil, waiting to be confirmed or denied based on your performance. It contains names written in permanence, sealed by a love that no human philosophy has ever fully comprehended, and no human experience has ever fully exhausted. Your name is in that book. It has always been there. Heaven does not make clerical errors, and the God who set the stars in place does not misplace the names of His children. The approval you have been searching for in the faces of other people, in the validation of professional titles and public recognition, in accomplishments stacked high enough to silence the inner voice that says you have not done enough. That approval was granted before you ever stepped foot into this world, before you had the opportunity to succeed at anything or fail at anything, before you were anything other than a thought in the mind of the one who decided to bring you into existence. What God declares in eternity, no earthly setback can overturn. What is written in heaven cannot be unwritten by anything that happens beneath it. The question was never whether you were good enough. The question was always whether you would learn to trust what was already decided about you long before you ever had the chance to prove yourself or stumble. But there is one reason you still cannot fully see what heaven already sees about your life, and it has everything to do with what has been quietly growing in your mind without your full permission. Doubt does not arrive loudly. It does not knock on the front door and announce itself with a bold declaration of unbelief. It is far more patient and far more subtle than that. It slips in through the back, through the exhaustion of a season that has gone on too long, through the ache of a prayer that seemed to dissolve unanswered, through the quiet and corrosive comparison you made the morning you watched someone else receive the very thing you had been holding in your heart and hoping for. It finds the cracks that grief and disappointment leave behind, and it sets up residence in those cracks as though it has always belonged there, as though its presence is simply a reasonable response to the evidence. For many of the people carrying this particular heaviness today, the doubt did not begin as deliberate unbelief. It began as heartbreak. There was a night when they prayed with everything they had, and the morning still brought the same problem, the same silence, the same unchanged reality. There was a season when they waited in genuine faith, when they spoke the right words and maintained the right posture, and believed with sincere expectation, and the breakthrough they were anticipating never arrived on the schedule they had prepared themselves for. There was a moment when someone they trusted said something that cut deeply enough to leave a mark that ordinary time could not heal, words that agreed with the worst things they had ever thought about themselves in their most vulnerable moments, words that found the places where they were already uncertain and confirmed the fear. And over time, those compounding experiences began to quietly rewrite the narrative playing in their minds, not with dramatic declarations, not with a conscious decision to stop believing, but with small, almost imperceptible edits to the story they were telling themselves about who they were and what was possible for them. Maybe God is distracted by larger concerns. Maybe he responds more readily to people with stronger faith or cleaner records. Maybe the way I prayed was wrong. Maybe I missed the window. Maybe I am simply too far gone for the kind of grace that gets things moving. A mother sits at the kitchen table late at night, the house finally quiet, spreading the bills she cannot cover across the wood surface, doing the math again, even though the math has not changed in the last 3 times she tried it, wondering in the hollowness of that hour whether every prayer she has prayed for her family has been received, or whether they have fallen into some gap between earth and heaven. A father sits in a waiting room under the particular fluorescent light that seems designed to make everything feel more frightening, holding test results he is afraid to fully read, wrestling not only with the fear of what the report might say, but with the deeper, quieter fear that God has turned his attention elsewhere at the very moment when he needs it most. A young man or woman scrolls through the evidence of their peers' lives, promotions, marriages, accomplishments, the visible markers of forward movement, while they feel inexplicably, stubbornly stuck, wondering what invisible flaw in their character or their faith or their choices is holding them in a place they have been trying to leave for years. Every single one of these people is beloved. Everyone is seen with perfect clarity by the eyes that see everything. But the enemy has known something about their future that they have been slowly convinced to forget, and it is precisely that knowledge that drives his relentless, patient campaign of doubt against each of them. The enemy of your soul is not particularly intimidated by your weakness. What genuinely frightens him, what sends a tremor through his entire operation, is the moment a person who carries the name of God begins to remember who they actually are. And so his strategy has never been to destroy you outright with some overwhelming assault, because he knows that visible attacks often drive people back toward the source of their strength. His strategy is far more insidious. His method has been to whisper a lie so consistently, through so many different voices, and in the context of so many different painful circumstances, that it gradually begins to sound like your own inner voice, reflecting back what is simply true about you. The lie arrives wearing many different costumes, but at its core it always carries the same message. You are the exception. Everyone else qualifies for the goodness of God, but not you. Grace is wide enough to cover the whole world, but somehow it stops just short of the specific place where you are standing. Other people receive healing, but your condition is somehow different. Other families receive the miracle, but yours has been noted and passed over. Other prayers are answered, but yours encounter some invisible barrier before they arrive. The lie is extraordinarily effective because it rarely presents itself as a full statement that can be examined and refuted. It presents itself as a feeling, a gnawing, persistent, low-frequency feeling that you are somehow located just outside the circle of those who genuinely receive the love and favor of God. And when that feeling is left unchallenged long enough, when it is not brought into the light and examined against what has actually been written, it stops feeling like a feeling and starts feeling like a fact. People who have accepted the lie as fact stop asking for the things they need because they have pre-decided the answer will be no. They pull back from opportunities that were built for them because they have concluded in advance that they will somehow disqualify themselves. They maintain a careful distance from community and vulnerability because they are certain that if anyone truly knew them, fully knew them, the outcome would be rejection. They live smaller lives than the ones they were created for, not because their calling is small, not because the plan written for them is limited, but because the lie has convinced them that their name is not in the book, that no entry exists for them in heaven's record, that the beautiful promises being spoken to others are simply not addressed to the person who is listening. But this is the truth that the lie cannot survive contact with. No file has ever gone missing in heaven. No name has ever been accidentally omitted. No soul has ever slipped through a gap in the record-keeping of eternity. And the evidence of this truth goes all the way back to a moment before your first breath that proves it beyond any argument the enemy has ever assembled. There was a moment not located in time as human beings experience it, but existing in the eternal present of God's awareness, where all things are simultaneously known when you were already known before you were yet formed, before your parents had chosen your name, before any human being had a vision for what your life would look like, before a single day of your existence had begun to unfold. Every one of those days was already seen, not observed passively from a distance, but known with the specific intimacy of a creator who made you deliberately and with full intention. Every struggle you would encounter along the way was already accounted for. Every valley you would be required to walk through was already mapped with exits built into the terrain. Every moment of confusion and grief and longing and waiting that you have ever experienced or will ever experience was already held in the hands of the one who wrote the days before they existed. Not as evidence of abandonment, not as proof that suffering was the plan, but as terrain within which something irreplaceable would one day be built. Your value was not assigned based on projections about how your life would turn out. It was not calibrated according to whether you would make all the right decisions, maintain all the right relationships, and arrive at visible success before a certain deadline. Your value was established at the moment the idea of you became real to the one who made you, and it has never once been revised based on your performance record. This is the reframing that changes the way a person moves through the world. You are not a victim of a story that went sideways in ways you never authorized. You are not a rough draft that never made it to the final version. You are not someone who once held potential but has spent it carelessly and cannot recover what was lost. You are someone who was chosen before the foundations of the world were constructed, called by name before your name existed in any human language, and loved with a love that was already in place before your first mistake gave you any reason to doubt that you deserved it. And the shift from understanding yourself as a victim of circumstances to understanding yourself as one who was chosen before the circumstances existed, that shift is not a denial of the pain you have genuinely experienced. It is the recognition that the pain does not carry the final word, because the one who wrote your name in heaven is still writing the story, and the story is not finished. Beside the name that was inscribed in the book of heaven before you existed in time, there is a declaration. It is not a checklist of qualifications you must meet before the declaration becomes applicable to you. It is not a conditional statement that holds only as long as your behavior maintains a certain standard. It is a statement of what is already permanently true, sealed in the unchangeable will of an eternal God, belonging to you not because of what you have earned or preserved, but because of the nature of the one whose character makes such declarations possible. The first word written beside your name is loved, not with the provisional, conditional love that human beings extend to one another when circumstances are favorable, and the relationship is uncomplicated, but with the fierce, pursuing, unrelenting love of a father who chose you before you had anything to offer, and has not revised that choice based on anything you have done since. A love that held on through your most difficult seasons, that did not flinch when you were not who you wanted to be, that pursued you through your wandering, that waited through your silence, that stood at the end of every road you tried before you returned. The second word written beside your name is forgiven. Every page of the history you wish you could go back and rewrite, every decision that has followed you with its weight and its shame, every moment you are still carrying in the hidden places where you hope no one looks, it has been addressed at a level deeper than human apology and human reconciliation can reach. The record has been cleared. The account has been settled. The debt that should have followed you has been canceled by an act that took place before you ever understood you owed anything. The third word is belonging. You are not an outsider looking through glass at a family that has never quite made room for you. You are a member of something that cannot be dissolved or dismantled. a household that extends beyond the boundaries of this life into a permanence that has no ending. The fourth word is protected. The things that have come against you have not reached as far as they intended, because there has been a boundary around what is permitted to touch you that was established by authority greater than anything that has ever tried to cross it. You have survived seasons that should have finished you, and the reason you are still standing is written right there, permanently, beside your name. The fifth word is blessed. Not blessed in the shallow, material sense that prosperity promises, but blessed in the comprehensive, lasting, deeply rooted sense of being permanently covered by the favor of the one who holds all outcomes in his hands. These are not labels on a wish list. These are facts recorded in a golden register of eternal promise, a heavenly book where what has been written cannot be scratched out, faded, or revised by anything that exists beneath the authority of the one who wrote it. Yet many children who carry all of these words beside their names find themselves unable to receive the fullness of what has been prepared and promised, and the reason for that inability is not located on heaven's side of the equation. The barrier blocking the experience of what has already been declared is not a divine decision to withhold. God has not posted a delay notice on your blessing because He is waiting for you to reach a certain score. He has not placed what belongs to you behind a door that requires a spotless performance record to unlock. The barrier is not located in heaven. It is located inside the human heart, built piece by piece from materials the enemy provided over time. Fear is the first and most formidable wall, not the healthy, instructive kind of fear that produces wisdom and caution, but the paralyzing variety that has been rehearsing worst-case scenarios so repeatedly and for so long that those scenarios have begun to feel like reliable prophecy. It is the fear that says, even if I step forward, I will be humiliated. Even if I pray with full sincerity, nothing will change, and I will only have opened myself to more disappointment. Even if I believe again, the believing will lead me somewhere that hurts, and the hurt will be worse than the resignation I have settled into. This kind of fear does not announce itself as fear, it masks itself as realism, as wisdom earned through experience, as the reasonable conclusion drawn from available evidence. But it is not wisdom. It is an agreement, an ongoing, daily agreement with the enemy's version of your future, rather than the version already written in heaven by the authority that supersedes every other. Self-condemnation is the second wall, and it is relentless. It is the internal voice that maintains a running account of everything done wrong, every person let down, every season wasted, every version of yourself you have been ashamed of. And it uses that evidence strategically, presenting it not as history, but as verdict, building a case, piece by piece, for why the declarations written beside your name in heaven somehow cannot apply to a person with your particular record. Shame is the third wall, the deep, wordless conviction that runs beneath the other two, the fundamental belief that at the core of who you are, there is something disqualifying, that no grace is quite sufficient to fully cover. Shame is what makes people shrink in the very places they were made to stand tall. And doubt is the fourth wall, the one that mortar and stones the other three into place, the persistent, practiced refusal to fully trust that what God has declared is more reliable than what the circumstances appear to confirm in this particular moment. These walls are real. They have done genuine and significant damage over time, but they are not permanent structures. They are not stronger than the word that was spoken over your life before time began. The moment you choose to release the weight you have been carrying, the moment you set down the prosecutorial case you have been building against yourself and stop adding your voice to the agreement with the enemy's verdict, something in the unseen world begins to move. And what begins to move has been in motion for longer than you realize. Heaven has not been quiet while you were doubting. That may be the most critical thing to understand about the season you have been walking through. The silence you have experienced has not been the silence of divine absence, but the silence of careful, precise preparation happening in a dimension you cannot yet observe with your natural eyes. There are things being arranged on your behalf right now that you have no access to from where you are standing. Connections are being positioned. Circumstances are being aligned with a specificity that would astound you if you could see the mechanics of it. Doors are being prepared that will look, when they eventually open, like ordinary and perhaps even unexpected opportunities, but whose timing will be so exactly right, so impossibly precise, that you will eventually look back and recognize the hand behind them with complete clarity. This is how God has always worked, not always in the visible, unmistakable, immediately interpretable display of power, but in the quiet, faithful, determined movement of a plan that was set in motion long before the problem currently facing you ever appeared on the horizon. Think of Joseph, a young man whose story appeared for the better part of 2 decades to consist of nothing but a consecutive series of catastrophic reversals. Betrayed by the brothers who were supposed to protect him, sold into a foreign country where no one knew his name or his history, serving faithfully in a household where he was falsely accused of a crime he did not commit, thrown into a prison without a trial, without representation, without recourse, and then forgotten in that prison when the one person who had the influence to speak on his behalf was freed and went back to his life without looking back. From every external angle, this was the story of a man who had been abandoned by the God who supposedly loved him. From the inside of the experience, it must have felt exactly like that, but heaven was not idle during those years. Every injustice was being cataloged. Every year in the pit and the dungeon was producing in Joseph a quality of character, a tested, proven, unshakable depth of wisdom and resilience and spiritual authority that could not have been manufactured any other way. No shortcut existed to the man he needed to become in order to carry what he was being prepared to carry. And when the door finally opened, it opened not onto a modest improvement in his situation, but onto something so wildly beyond what any imprisoned man in that cell could have imagined, that the suffering of every preceding year was retroactively transformed. It became, in the light of what followed, the necessary preparation for an extraordinary purpose. Think of David, anointed with the oil of kingship, while he was still a teenager watching his father's sheep, and then required to spend the following years running for his life through the wilderness, hiding in the caves of Adullam, with a group of outcasts and misfits, waiting for a promise that appeared not only unfulfilled, but actively contradicted by every development. Think of Abraham, asked to leave everything recognizable and walk toward a destination withheld from him until he arrived, carrying a promise so large that it tested the boundaries of what faith can hold, waiting decades for even the beginning of the fulfillment he had been shown. These were not men whom God had forgotten. These were men God was building into the precise instruments required for the precise assignments that had been written for them before the world began. And there is a reason your breakthrough has not yet materialized in visible form, a reason that belongs to the same category as Joseph's prison and David's wilderness and Abraham's long waiting. And that reason is far more purposeful and far more kind than punishment. Waiting is not God withholding from you as a consequence of something you did wrong. This misunderstanding is one of the most quietly devastating things a person can carry into a season of delay, because it sends them searching through their own history for the cause of the delay, convincing them that if they can just identify and confess the right failure or perform the right spiritual correction, the blockage will clear and what has been withheld will be released. But the waiting season was never designed to be a holding cell for the disobedient. It was designed to be a formation space for those who are being shaped into something that requires more than they currently have the capacity to carry. A young person handed an enormous responsibility before they have developed the character required to steward it is not blessed by the early arrival of the gift, they are crushed by it. God's timing is not a bureaucratic delay or an indifference to your need. It is an act of profound kindness on the part of someone who can see the full picture of what you are being prepared for. The qualities being forged in the silence, the patience that can only be produced under sustained pressure, the depth that only develops in seasons where there is nothing visible to hold on to, the unshakable rootedness that is built in the spaces where faith has no evidence to point to except the character of the one who promised. These are not consolation prizes for the delay. They are foundational materials for the structure that is being built. The disappointment has been real. The grief of holding a hope for a long time and watching it not arrive on any of the schedules you had expected is genuinely, significantly real. There is no spiritual reframing that makes the ache of that disappear, and God is not asking you to pretend that it does not hurt. What He is asking is something more honest and more costly than pretending. He is asking you to hold the ache while simultaneously holding the truth that a God who wrote your name in eternity before you drew your first breath is not the kind of God who forgets what he promised. He is not withholding from you out of cruelty. He is preparing you and preparing your circumstances in ways that your current vantage point cannot yet reveal, but that will one day be as obvious and as unmistakable as the morning after the longest night you have ever survived. Soon, and the word soon is not offered casually, but with the full weight of the certainty of the one who inhabits eternity, you will understand why this particular season had to be the shape it was. There are things already in motion, not visible yet from where you stand, but entirely real, as substantial and as present as anything you have ever been able to touch. The preparation happening in the background of your story right now is more extensive than you could track, even if you had access to the complete architecture of the plan, and the pieces being moved into position are being moved by hands that have never fumbled anything they were carrying. Pay attention to the evidence that is already accumulating around you, the unexpected peace that settled over you in a particular moment when your circumstances had not yet changed by a single degree, the door that closed on something that would have cost you far more than it appeared to offer, the relationship that ended and in ending created space for something truer and more sustaining to eventually fill, the conversation that happened at what appeared to be coincidence, but arrived carrying exactly the specific word you needed on the exact day. Your need for it was most acute. None of these were accidents. None of these were the random output of an indifferent universe stumbling through time. They were fingerprints. They were the fingerprints of a God who is actively involved in every corner of the story he is writing through your life, attending to details you will not recognize as significant until later, when you look back and see how the pieces assembled themselves into something only intentional craftsmanship could have produced. The breakthrough you have been waiting for is closer to you right now than the emotional distance between where you stand and where it seems to exist. The gap between this moment and the answer to the prayers you have been praying is not filled with divine disinterest. It is filled with preparation, alignment, and a movement of unseen things that is more active and more purposeful than the silence surrounding it suggests. Hope, in its truest and most powerful form, is not optimistic, guessing. It is the confident expectation of what has already been promised by a source that has never, across the entirety of recorded history, broken a single promise. Anticipation is not the naivety of someone who refuses to look at reality. It is the posture of someone who has read the end of the story and understands that the author does not abandon the characters he loves in the difficult chapters, even when the narrative requires difficulty to produce its full effect. Trust is not the elimination of questions. It is the choice to carry your questions with open hands rather than closed fists, to hold the uncertainty while keeping the anchor, to remain connected to the source of truth, even when the truth is not yet fully visible. The season is in the process of turning. The evidence of that turning is already present for anyone willing to look past the surface of circumstances into what is being worked beneath them. And now, with everything that has been spoken into this moment, it is time to hear what heaven is asking of you today, not at some future point when things have improved, not when your faith feels stronger and your situation feels more hopeful, but today, exactly as you are, exactly where you are standing. Stop doubting, not because the questions you carry are illegitimate or the pain you have experienced is not real, but because doubt has already extracted more from your life than it was ever entitled to take. It has taken mornings that were meant to be filled with the energy of expectation and converted them into mornings weighted with the familiar dread of more of the same. It has taken the prayers that were supposed to be spoken with the authority of someone who knows who they are and diminished them into whispers that apologize for existing. It has taken the bandwidth that was meant to fuel the calling on your life and redirected it almost entirely into the exhausting, low-grade management of fears that have not even materialized. Doubt has made you functionally smaller than you were created to be. It has convinced you to occupy only a fraction of the life that was designed for you, to take up a fraction of the space you were given the right to stand in, to speak with a fraction of the authority that belongs to someone whose name is written in the record of heaven. And today, the invitation being extended is to lay it down, not to manufacture a performance of confidence you do not currently feel in your body, not to put on a mask of triumphant faith over the top of genuine grief, but to make a decision, a clear, deliberate, act of the will decision to stop adding your voice to the agreement with fear and to redirect that agreement toward what heaven has already spoken over you. Stop looking at yourself through the distorting lens of your failures and your delays. The woman who stayed too long in something that was not good for her is not defined by that chapter of her story. She is defined by the name written in heaven beside hers, which reads loved and chosen and not finished yet. The man who walked away from things he now deeply wishes he had held on to is not the sum of his regrets and his losses. He is the sum of what the one who made him has declared him to be, and that declaration has not been modified because a season went sideways. The young person who has felt overlooked and underestimated and invisible in the places where visibility seemed to matter, they are not invisible in the place that matters with absolute permanence. In the record that cannot be altered, their name is present, their calling is intact, their future is written with exactly the same confidence and certainty as every promise that has ever been made by a God whose word has never once failed to accomplish what he sent it to do. Walk today as someone who has been blessed, not because everything is resolved and every prayer has received its answer and every closed door has swung back open. Walk as someone who is blessed because blessing, in its deepest and most enduring form, is not a set of circumstances. It is a status conferred by the one who holds all circumstances in his hands. You are not waiting to become chosen. You were chosen before time began, and you are walking through the process that is producing in you everything necessary to fully inhabit what has been prepared for you. You are not waiting to become loved. You are loved right now, here, in the middle of the unfinished chapters, and the unanswered questions, and the circumstances that have not yet aligned with the promise. You are not on a waiting list for belonging. You already belong to something that cannot be dismantled, written into a covenant more permanent than any contract this world has ever witnessed. Begin to speak to your own heart in the language of what is already written. When fear rises, address it directly with the truth that your protection is not contingent on your ability to manage every possible threat. It is the standing responsibility of the one who placed his authority beside your name in the eternal record. When shame lifts its voice, respond with the fact that the account has been cleared, the debt canceled, not provisionally or temporarily, but completely and with finality. When comparison turns your eyes towards someone else's visible progress and makes you feel like you have fallen irreparably behind, remind yourself that your story runs on a timeline that was not written by anyone else's hand. It was written by an author who does not waste chapters, does not misplace characters, and does not arrive late to his own story. Your name is written in heaven. That sentence carries more weight and authority than anything this world has ever written about you, spoken over you, or whispered against you. It outranks every negative evaluation you have ever received. It overrides every cruel word spoken in a moment of anger, or ignorance, or cruelty. It supersedes every medical report that has tried to have the final say over your body and your future. It outlasts every financial statement that declared your season finished, every opinion formed by someone who did not have access to the full truth of who you are, every judgment passed by someone whose view of you was limited to the worst moment you have ever lived through. The name written in heaven is the truest version of your identity that exists anywhere in the created universe, and the words recorded beside it, loved, forgiven, belonging, protected, blessed, are not aspirational language. They are not declarations that will become true at some future moment when you have done enough to earn them. They are facts, established in the unalterable record of eternity, spoken by the authority that stands above every other authority in existence, and whose words have been holding the cosmos together since before human consciousness existed to observe it. No failure carries clearance to remove your name from that book. No sin already covered and forgiven retains the power to scratch out what was written before your life began. No rejection delivered by someone who could not see your worth. No judgment passed by someone who did not have all the information. No sentence handed down by the court of other people's limited opinions. None of it has any jurisdiction whatsoever over what has been written in heaven. The enemy who has been whispering doubt into your ear is fully aware of this. He knows with perfect clarity that the moment you truly believe it, not as a concept filed in memory, but as a living truth held in the place where identity is formed, and decisions emerge from, and life is actually lived from, he loses the most powerful weapon in his entire arsenal against you. Because a person who genuinely knows that their name is written in heaven does not live like someone who might be forgotten. A person who knows they are loved by an authority greater than any that has ever existed does not wither under the temporary and limited opinions of people whose view is partial. A person who knows that their breakthrough is being prepared with care and their season is being shaped by hands that have never dropped anything, that person does not collapse under the weight of a delay. This is the life you were written for, not the reduced version that years of doubt and fear have shaped you into accepting, the full version. The one where you walk through the world with the quiet, settled confidence of someone who has heard the verdict and knows beyond argument that it holds. Today is the day you return to that version of yourself. Not tomorrow, not when the circumstances catch up to the promise. Today, in this body, in this moment, with this name that has been known since before the first star was placed in the sky. You are not a forgotten soul moving through an indifferent universe that does not know your name. You are a named, claimed, loved, chosen, protected, and permanently blessed child of a living God, whose record is perfect and whose word does not return to him empty. What has been written beside your name in eternity is more real than any fear you have ever felt, more permanent than any failure you have ever committed, more powerful than any voice that has ever tried to convince you that you were anything less than what you were made to be. Receive it today. Receive the love that was decided before your first mistake gave you any reason to wonder whether you deserved it. Receive the forgiveness that canceled the debt and cleared the record, and released the hold that shame has had on the person you were created to become. Receive the belonging that makes you not a visitor to the story of grace, but a permanent, named resident of it. Receive the protection that has been surrounding you through every season, even the ones where you felt most exposed. Receive the blessing that is already sealed, already declared, already moving through every circumstance that has felt most resistant, making a way where no way appears to exist. You are loved, you are chosen, you are written in heaven, and that, my beloved child, is the only verdict that will ever carry the authority to define what your life actually is and what it is permanently meant to become. There is something that happens in the interior life of a person the moment they stop fighting the love of God and simply allow themselves to receive it. It is not a dramatic explosion. It is more like a quiet unlocking, a releasing of something that has been braced for a very long time. The muscles of the spirit have been clenched in preparation for disappointment for so many seasons that many people have forgotten what it feels like to be open, to be expectant without armor, to believe without the defensive hedge of maybe not this time. And yet that unlocking is what is being invited today, not with conditions, not with a performance requirement attached to the invitation. Simply, open your hands. Let what was already decided over your life before you existed begin to settle into you, like light settling into a room when the curtains are finally pulled back. The light was always there. The room was not dark because the sun was absent, it was dark because something was blocking the entrance. And the thing that has been blocking the entrance in your life is not a deficiency in what God has prepared for you. It is the accumulated weight of a story you have been told about yourself that was never true, dressed up in enough painful evidence to seem credible, but rooted in the fundamental lie that the God who wrote your name in eternity ever stopped caring about what happened to the person attached to that name. There are people walking through today who have carried a particular burden for a very long time, a burden that looks from the outside like discouragement, but that at its center is actually grief. Grief over prayers that seem to go unheard. Grief over the version of their life that existed in their imagination and never materialized in the way they had believed it would. Grief over people they lost, opportunities they missed, and seasons they cannot go back to. And this grief is real. God does not ask you to dismiss it. He does not offer a spiritual bypass around it. What he offers instead is something that meets the grief where it actually lives, a presence that enters into the difficult places rather than asking you to exit them before comfort arrives. He knows the weight of what you have been carrying because he has been present in every moment that added to it. He was there on the night you wept with no one watching. He was in the room when the words were spoken that left a mark. He was present in the silence after the diagnosis, after the loss, after the door closed on something you had built your hope upon. He was there, and he was not unmoved by what he witnessed. And what he is saying to that grief today, not dismissing it, not rushing past it, but speaking directly into it, is that the pain does not mean you were abandoned. It means you were in a place that he had not yet finished working in. It means the chapter was still being written. It means that the one who knows the end of your story from the beginning was present, even in the moments that felt most like endings, and those moments were not endings. They were transitions written by a hand that does not bring a story to a close before it has said everything it was sent to say. So let this be the day when the agreement changes. Let this be the day when you stop rehearsing the case against yourself and begin rehearsing instead the truth that was spoken over your life before you had any say in the matter. Say it aloud if you need to, because there is something that happens when a person hears the truth in their own voice, spoken in the air of the room where they actually live. Say, "My name is written in heaven." Say, "I am not forgotten." Say, "The one who made me has not looked away." Say, "What has been promised over my life has not been canceled by anything I have done or failed to do." Say, "The waiting has not been punishment, it has been preparation." Say, "What is coming is worth the cost of what has been endured to prepare me for it." These are not empty affirmations. They are declarations of alignment moments where the person speaking chooses to come into agreement with the higher truth rather than the lower narrative, where the mouth and the spirit begin working together to call back into presence what doubt had convinced you was no longer available. And when you speak them, something shifts. Not always visibly, not always immediately, but in the fabric of what is real, in the territory between what is seen and what is unseen, something responds to the agreement of a child of God with the Word of God. Doors that were positioned to open begin their motion. Resources that were being held in reserve begin their movement. People who were being prepared for divine intersection with your story begin to move toward the moment of meeting. The whole infrastructure of heaven, which has never stopped working on your behalf, begins to find less resistance in you and more cooperation, and what was already prepared for you begins its approach into the visible from the invisible world where it has been waiting all along. You were made for this moment, not the moment of perfect circumstances, not the moment when everything finally aligns in the way you can understand and manage and control, but this moment, exactly as it is, with all its unresolved pieces and its open questions and its still waiting promises. You were made to stand in this exact moment and say, "I believe. I believe that my name is written. I believe that the love declared over me is real. I believe that the breakthrough being prepared is genuine. I believe that the one who began this story in my life will complete it, not because my faith is perfect, but because his faithfulness has never once been conditional on the perfection of those he loves." That kind of faith, the kind that rises not in the absence of evidence, but in the presence of contrary evidence, and chooses trust anyway, is the most powerful force available to a human being. It is the force that moved mountains in the stories of those who were written before you and whose testimonies were preserved, so that you would know, in seasons like this one, that the same God who met them is the God who is meeting you right now in this very moment. Beloved, heaven has spoken. The record stands. Your name is there. It has always been there, and not one word written beside it has been revised by a single thing you have lived through. Walk forward from this moment as someone who knows it. Walk as someone who has heard the verdict and accepted it, not because the circumstances have all fallen into place, but because the word of the one who holds all circumstances is more reliable than any evidence your situation has ever assembled against you. This is your inheritance. This is your reality. This is the truth that was decided about you before the world had a name, and it is enough. It has always been enough. You are loved, you are chosen, you are seen, you are written, and nothing in all of creation will ever have the authority to change that.